Greetings, my fellow wealth hackers. Welcome to another episode of the Truth About Real Estate Investing Show. My name is Erwin Cito, and I hope you're all having an amazing week. I know I am. My golf game is improving. Last week, I was able to trim 16 and 18 strokes off previous rounds of golf at respective golf courses, and tracking results and using consistent rules of play make tracking more effective. And there's an old saying in business, what gets measured gets done. So whatever you deem important in life, you should be checking on it at regular intervals. For example, how many times did you spend time with the kids each week? How many date nights you had, net worth, monthly cash flow, vacation weeks, etc. All important metrics to the wealth hacker. Aside from golf, it's been an awesome week. One evening after dinner, I took the kids for an evening stroll around the pond behind the house, and we made it. We've been making our thing to see what wildlife we could find each night. I was wondering what we find. This spring so far, with the kids, we found a pair of beavers, frogs, more recently baby geese and ducklings, a turtle, and this week, a nesting snapping turtle laying eggs. So cool. I don't know about you, but this is the first time I've ever witnessed a turtle laying eggs, less than 200 yards from my house, nonetheless. Anyways, she laid somewhere around 30 eggs just next to a walking path. So to protect the eggs, the next morning when the mom was gone, the kids and I installed 2 orange cones next to the nest so no one would step on it. I used long golf tees to pin down the cones so they don't just blow away. And now I've ordered some reflective driveway markers for a longer term solution. After Googling and finding out that baby turtles need 60 days to incubate, I need a longer term solution. I also scolded a lady in front of my kids for getting too close to the nesting mom. She got within 2 feet so she could get a better look, and then the mom was tucking her head into her shell, which is what they do when they feel threatened. So this is what I'm doing with my kids to enjoy the outdoors and teaching them about wildlife, and just as importantly, respecting living things. Except for mosquitoes. I'm nobody's food source. If the turtle sighting wasn't exciting enough, the highlight of my week was when a friend of mine and client, Coach Nanabai, texted me letting me know we could book our second COVID shot, and I did right away. The big day is July 14th, and I couldn't be more excited about putting this whole coronavirus thing behind me. As someone who enjoys doing research, reading charts, etc., the most recent stats out of the UK and how the new COVID case to hospitalization rates are dropping, even as a fourth wave begins thanks to the Delta variant, I can tell vaccines work. So the Delta variant is the one that ravaged India, so no thank you from me and my family. Me personally, I'm not going to hide in my home. My kids are going back to school in person this fall. Knowing our borders are basically open, and knowing how I personally know people who have avoided or simply paid the fine to skip the quarantine hotel, variants will continue to come into Canada, into Ontario, so my choice is for Cherry and I to protect ourselves. So thank goodness for science will protect us from bad government, but thank you government for the free vaccine anyways. I almost forgot. I also gave a 30-minute presentation to 60 grade 8 students on investing as part of their financial literacy segment of their math class, hosted by my award-winning teacher friend, Miss Horst. She wins awards every year for being a leading-edge teacher. For example, she introduced technology into the classroom. She asked the board to buy a whole bunch of Chromebooks, and students even prepare school reports in private blog format. The world needs more teachers like Miss Horst. Anyways, after getting the okay that I was allowed to be unfiltered about all the money printing going on, stuff not covered in the mainstream media, I think I did all right. I hear some students took as many as 6 pages of notes, and even one student reached out on my website asking if I would be their mentor. As always, it is my honor to give back to the community what I've learned. So if you're an educator out there, grade 8 and above, I'd be happy to present to your students as well. Just ask. I think you know where to find me. I know I wish I knew this stuff earlier. As I shared with the students, I believe my net worth would be 4 or 5 times higher if I had started this journey at their age. On to this week's show. We have architects and innovators of Laneway Housing, Ryan Fernandes and Craig Race from Lanescape.ca. Young Brian reached out on my website to let me know he's been a long-time listener of the show. More recently, he's been an investor, buying a house, and what's going on with his work at Lanescape, designing laneway homes, which are like laneway garages repurposed into apartments or brand new built tiny homes on a laneway behind a house. The progressive Toronto government makes laneway housing attractive investments. Hence, we have Ryan and Craig here on today's show to share how the investment works. Ryan and Craig have 50 laneway houses. They're at various stages, but they have that much experience under their belt, and they're here to share the hard and the soft costs, the rents, tenant profiles, and where to find such opportunities. Hopefully, the next phase will be garden suites. So we don't need laneways in order to build these properties, and we can have more housing affordability. So for free property reviews and resources, go to www.lanescape.ca. I hope you enjoy the show. Gentlemen, Ryan, Craig, what's keeping you guys busy these days?
Building houses on laneways as usual.
Ryan?
Yeah, so just helping lead the effort on the laneway housing front. And I've recently started getting into real estate investing as well. Just purchased my first property last year, so kind of starting to do that on the side as well.
Excellent, excellent. So, FYI to yourselves and the listener, it's not often that people write in and ask to come on the show, but your guys' references checked out. The
Yeah,
show
I'm
is
sure
all.
it's even I'm sure it's even less often that people who write in to get on the show actually make it here. So we feel very privileged. Thank you.
It's less than 1 in 10. Is
Well,
like
it's
I
great
was
to be here.
like I was sharing with my staff before on the previous meeting is like we're not. This isn't never meant to be an advertising platform for folks, but people want it, right? Um, but my thing is always if folks have good ways of investing and helping people, then I want to hear about it, right? So that's why you guys are here. So let's start off with the obvious question: what is laneway housing?
So we've had it in Toronto a little bit longer than you all in Hamilton, but not much longer, frankly. It was really an idea that in Canada originated in Vancouver, where if you had a laneway at the rear of your property, you could build essentially a second home to accommodate a secondary suite. That became an as-of-right policy in Vancouver around 2008 and in Toronto in 2018. Although Toronto actually has a very rich history of converting buildings on our laneways into houses, we've been doing that for decades here. So it used to be something that was unique and one-off and difficult to get approval for, but now it's a housing typology that's fully as of right. It's incentivized so that homeowners and investors are given legs up to go straight to permit without having to go to committee of adjustment or face high costs. So it's really become a new tool in the toolbox for adding housing to our low-rise residential neighborhoods in a sensitive way.
Okay, let's take a couple steps back. Uh, some folks don't know what a laneway is. Can you explain what a laneway is?
Sure, and they're fairly common in Toronto and also in Hamilton and other municipalities. Essentially, they're small streets at the back of your property, typically used for accommodating vehicles and rear yard garages. Um, but although that's what they're intended for, in terms of the spirit of them, they're actually places where families will congregate and kids will play. So they're really fascinating pieces of urban infrastructure that, in our opinion, have been historically underutilized.
And who owns that land? The
The
laneway
city of
itself.
Toronto,
Okay, so the
the city
municipality
does.
typically owns it.
That's right.
Cool, cool. And now I remember when I was in Vancouver back in like 2018, 2019, and laneway houses were all over the news regularly because they were selling for ridiculous amounts of money. I saw one, like I didn't see it sell, but my friend, we were touring and actually saw the property, a laneway house that sold for $800,000. And
Wow.
so for the listeners' benefit, can you paint the picture of what a laneway house looks like that would sell for $800,000 in Vancouver?
Yeah, so I think one of the differences in Toronto is that the city's been really clear in that they don't want these laneway houses to actually be severed from the lot. The way the bylaw is set up is that the laneway house is actually subordinate to the main house. And so as a result, all the services, the water, the sewer, the gas, hydro, that all comes from the main house. And so they really don't want these to actually be separated.
Right, right.
So these laneway suites do add a ton of value to the property itself. But right now they're not supposed to be sold on their own. And one of the tricky things right now is, since they're still quite recent, is that there aren't very many comps on the market of houses that have laneway suites as well that are being sold.
Such is the life of an investor.
Well,
The
the good news
duplex
is we're
thing was
getting,
no different before.
yeah, the good
Illegal
news
blind
is we're getting
duplexes.
more comps every day for rental values. So we're starting to see a pretty broad range of rents for different size units that we're using to build our pro formas around. But Ryan's right, there have been essentially none that have sold yet. So we're banking on high values just based on cap rate assessments. But we'll see what happens when people actually start buying them.
So can you paint a picture of like what does a laneway house look like? The ones that people are doing now, and maybe before and now, and then what the rents are like. Like, are these like 1 bedroom bachelors, three
Yeah, so I
bedroom?
think one of the misconceptions is that laneway houses are tiny, and some people kind of think of them as like these tiny houses, but the truth is they can actually be really quite large. And what we're seeing is they can be anywhere from 500 square feet to upwards of 1,700 square feet. And if you add a basement, which you can, although it adds quite significant costs because of the shoring and structural requirements, you can get even more square footage, even upwards of 2,000 square feet. So these suites are actually quite large. We're averaging probably 2 to 3 bedrooms, I would say, in each one. Some people do opt for a 1 bedroom unit if they are keeping a spot for parking below.
Got it. And then the basement, is that meant to be part? So is it meant to be one whole home, or is that something you could potentially rent out separately?
Yeah, so right now you're not allowed to split it into two separate units. So you can kind of just have one building, and then the basement can have like an additional bedroom or kind of space for storage.
How many people are
Although
planning?
some people are kind of thinking in the future maybe the city will come around and allow you to split it into a couple units. So we'll see.
Right, right. Because like the garden suite, or I call them backyard suites. I don't know why they'd be called garden suites, but I call them backyard suites. But in our early discussions about it, we're already, like, among my friends and I, we're already talking about putting in basements in them for the potential for another unit, self-contained apartment within. So that's not what things are doing right now.
Not yet.
And then so with in my community of real estate investors, a lot of us do legal basement apartments, and one of the biggest sticking points is parking. A lot of the bylaws, zoning have they're required to have a parking spot, an extra parking spot. So, for example, a house with a basement apartment, pretty much everywhere outside of Toronto, it needs 2 parking spots, sometimes in line, sometimes side by side. And then we don't know what they're going to do for the if we want a third unit. Do we need a third parking spot on the property? Like what are do you have any parking limitations with laneway
Yeah,
housing?
so in Toronto, it's actually quite different than a lot of the other cities. So in Toronto, if you have a single family house, you need the one spot. If you add in a basement apartment, you still need the one spot. Then if you add a triplex, you need two, a quadplex, you need three. But then if you add a laneway suite, your requirement actually goes down to zero, because these lots are in areas that are really well serviced by public transit, and they're super close to amenities. So the city's actually quite progressive in that way. You do need two spots for bicycle parking, so whether that's on the lot outside or inside. But if you put a laneway suite, essentially you don't need a parking spot.
Okay, so that's new to me. I don't even know what a bicycle parking spot looks like. What is a bicycle? What does 2 spots for bicycles look like?
Well, it's essentially just a space allocation, or if you can do a vertical bike parking space that technically has a smaller plan dimension, but requires a rack on the wall or a hook on the wall.
That simple. Like what's the investment for one of these?
As small as zero. If you literally have a space on your floor plan large enough to accommodate a bike sitting on the floor, that's satisfactory, much like space in your yard where you can park a car.
Well, a bike takes a considerably smaller amount of space than a car.
Indeed, it does. I mean, you got to start working in Toronto more. What can we say? The council is starting to become fairly ambitious about reducing parking regulations, and we've seen that in action. And Ryan's right. The laneway suites work so beautifully with that because anywhere there are laneways in Toronto, they're in a neighborhood that's central to the city, so it's inherently got transit. It's kind of a perfect symbiosis of where you can build them is where transit already exists.
Okay, so
Yeah,
so
like I think the majority of the properties with laneways are in central Toronto and East York.
can you okay? Can you what are the boundaries? Give me some streets or subway stations that apply for the areas that you can find laneway opportunities for laneway housing.
The majority are sort of between High Park and the beach neighborhood and as far north as St. Clair. Although it's not that straightforward, there are laneways all over the city and areas within that boundary that don't have laneways. But generally speaking, they're in Toronto proper. There aren't very many in Scarborough, North York, or Etobicoke.
Is there an era or of those homes? I'm trying to help the listener trying to identify make it easier for them to identify areas where this be possible. Is there a certain time period that laneways were more common, like the 1930s or something, for example?
And older, yes. Many of the Century neighborhoods in Toronto are where you find the laneways. So neighborhoods that were developed in the late 1800s to the mid 1900s, really. And it's honestly, there's not a lot of commonality between the neighborhoods other than you've either got them or you don't. And laneways are identified on the city zoning maps as well as on websites hosted by the Laneway Project and other research bodies like that.
So I have a history
Yeah, so
question to ask. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
no, I was just gonna say, so basically, as long as you're within the city of Toronto and your zoning is residential and you have a laneway, there's a good chance that you can build a laneway suite. I think there's just one kind of small, tiny enclave in Toronto where, for some reason, they didn't want any part of this, and they somehow had enough political clout to kind of get out of it. So there's this one tiny area in Toronto where you're not allowed to build these.
I love NIMBYism. Oh, can I have a brief history lesson? What was the motivation to create laneways? Because like most places just have roads.
Honestly, it was for vehicles. The laneways became prevalent sort of pre-automobile, but especially in the early days of the automobile. And streetscapes were traditionally just front doors and gardens. So garages on the fronts of houses literally were not a thing in the early 1900s, and it was logical to put stables or garages and the like behind the house on a small utilitarian road, a laneway.
Very good, very good. And now, what is the motivation for homeowners and investors to be investing in laneway homes?
Well, aside from the parking requirement making life very easy, it's generally just a typology that is very light on regulation. It's pretty easy to comply with the zoning bylaws and go straight to building permit with an as of right design. So for example, we've done about 50 projects so far, and we've only gotten a committee of adjustment 3 times to date. And all those cases were because we had really weird, unique lots that forced our clients to go to it, not because we wanted extra height or extra floor area or anything like that. So it's really just an efficient, cost-effective way to get approvals done, and it's a high-quality unit. And a basement apartment or any other kind of integral secondary suite, you're invariably sharing a wall or a floor with someone else. It can lead to construction and just general quality of life issues, sounds and smells. Whereas with a laneway suite, you have a detached second unit that has effectively its own door on a laneway. It's literally like you're creating a second home.
Yeah, and one other thing to add is that for homeowners in Toronto, they can build these properties on land that they already own. And laneway suites are exempt from development charges as well. So it's a really good investment for people that already own the land.
No development charge? I
That's
didn't
right.
mention that.
Well, that's
What-
another thing. I mean, council's been really strong about reducing parking requirements. They've also put their money where their mouth is when it comes to incentivizing homeowners to build rental housing. Toronto's had a tall and sprawl issue for a long time where we've got high-rise towers in the core and then large swaths of low-rise neighborhoods where the population is shrinking. And it's just not a sustainable growth pattern. So council, when they approved this policy, they incentivize people to build these because we need more rental housing that's family oriented in our low-rise neighborhoods.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous whenever I'm driving around with my wife and like I look at a new development and they're building like 3 stories in a high density area or what will be a very high density area. I'm like, that's ridiculous. We have a housing shortage issue and you're building only 3 stories.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I've seen a renaissance in Toronto housing in my career, which has not been a long career, but even in recent past, the allowances for secondary suites within the homes, the creation of a policy for laneway suites, and now we're seeing the city really keep running with that. They're looking at garden suites, other ways to make infill and low-rise housing more accessible and affordable. It's been amazing how we've identified this as a problem and we're starting to see real action when it comes to our housing policies.
No, I know you mentioned no development charges. I think it was Ryan that mentioned earlier that you're connecting to the existing property, which is I know is a massive cost savings versus having to run new utilities to a property. Could you explain the cost of running utilities to a new property, an unserviced property, versus being able to connect to a laneway house, for example?
I mean, you're absolutely right that paying for new services is not cheap. Like it adds tens of thousands of dollars to a build cost. Whereas if you're just creating a secondary meter or even just branching off from beyond the meter you currently have, it is a cost, but it's a cost that you can deal with directly with your contractor. So it saves money, but it's also just easier because you don't have to worry about a utility bringing in a new connection and connecting to that. So it works really well, and really the systems are in place to already do that. We've been doing that with basement apartments and other kinds of integral secondary units that we sub-meter for decades. Now it's just a matter of running a small trench to the back where we can plug it into the laneway suite.
Yeah, and if your basement's unfinished, that's even better, obviously, because you're doing less damage to the existing house.
Got it. So do this before you finish the basement.
Yeah, definitely worth planning if you are doing renovations to the main house. Keeping in mind if you want to add a laneway suite or a garden suite in the future.
Yeah, and then I think it's good advice for the listener, like you said, to plan. Whenever I look at a property, I'm always thinking highest and best use. What is the most I can do from this, and then plan from that. So if I'm gonna put in a laneway house, I'm gonna do all that what I need to do before including rough-ins for utilities, before I would finish the basement, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hopefully, and that's the point of the show, is to hopefully save folks from these kind of rookie mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So
One other interesting fact, if you are doing work to the existing house, one of the requirements for laneway suites is that they're smaller in area than the main house. So it's actually quite funny that if you wanted to increase the size of the laneway suite, potentially you could add area to the main house.
Cool.
As long as you still fit within all the other requirements of the laneway bylaw, that is.
So it becomes kind of like an addition / laneway suite.
Well, it wouldn't be connected, but generally the policy just says that it needs to be smaller in area.
Interesting. Actually, no, we need to go back on something, because you mentioned. So okay, let's actually narrow it a bit. What are investors doing specifically? Because homeowners have different plans, right? Sometimes they just want a place for like their mom or something like that. So maybe they do a bachelor or one bedroom. Investors, they're probably gonna be pushing for density, a 2 or 3 bedroom, right? Is that what you're seeing? And then my question would be, as an investor, what would that cost to create? And then and also what are they renting it for?
Yeah, definitely. So the use case really plays a big role in what kind of laneway suite you want to build. So for families that are kind of housing other family members, they might want to create a laneway suite where there's a nice connection to the main house. They'd also probably not be trying to squeeze in like all kinds of bedrooms here and there, versus some of our investor clients are trying to fit in a few bedrooms here to maximize their returns. And we're also seeing that ideally they're kind of aiming for 2 to 3 bedrooms, and usually without a basement, just because the basement adds quite a bit of cost. So if you are going for the basement, then you should have like a really good reason for that.
Well, hopefully you can suite it. If you can't suite it, I'm not doing it.
Well, it's an interesting debate. I mean, we build these for ourselves, and our model is put a second unit in the main house and build a laneway suite, because you can do both of those things without going to committee of adjustment and without paying development charges. So you can go from 1 to 3 fully as of right in under a year if you have your ducks in a row. But
Oh,
we actually
sorry,
put
Craig, under a
basement
year meaning between like permit application to being like done build, or
from when you close on the property to when you have it occupied. Yeah.
wow, that's fantastic. That's much cleaner
Yeah.
than like these triplex conversions I know people do. They buy like a 2.5 story, 3 story Victorian semi usually, and then they turn them into triplexes. Like that, I
Mhm.
think that takes like at least 2 years.
It's all about avoiding committee of adjustment. I mean, the bylaws are in place to create these kinds of sensitive secondary units. So if you have the right property, you can go from 1 to 3 fully within the bylaws. Um, as you should, because that's a responsible way to add density in a way that won't affect the neighborhood. So that's kind of a really easy density model that we're seeing people roll out. And I was mentioning basements. I mean, we put basements in our investment properties. Our theory is that maybe you're only getting an extra bedroom and a den or something out of it today. But that extra square footage at today's cost is going to look like the best investment you ever made 20 or 30 years from now.
Right. Yeah, condos are selling for as high as like 1,800 a square foot. So what's your
Yeah, I
cost?
mean, at the end of the day, it's extra space. And, if you're betting on long-term ownership, having that space is just going to be more revenue in the future.
Right. Okay, so how much? How much for what? Say I want a 3 bedroom laneway house with a basement. What's that going to cost me?
So the general rule for non-basement projects is you're going to be in the $300,000 to $500,000 range. That's an all-in budget, including your construction costs and soft costs. When you add a basement, that's about an extra $200,000 in cost. So you only want to add a basement on a larger project where you're getting a lot of space out of it. And also, the barrier to entry is relatively high. So if you already own a property where you can squeeze a 1 bedroom in, go for it. But I wouldn't target those as purchases. If you're buying a property to build this from scratch, you want to yield at least a 2 bedroom laneway suite, if not a 3 or a 4 or a 5.
Wow. Do you have a typical number of
Well,
bedrooms?
most of our projects are 2 to 3 bedrooms. That's fairly easy to accommodate, even without a basement, as long as you buy the right property.
Okay, so $300,000 to $500,000 budget for the laneway house, plus 200 roughly. I'm not gonna hold you the, I know absolutely things are
Don't build
never
your
set
pro
in
forma
stone.
on this.
Yeah. And then I'm sure the listeners wondering, like, they always want to know, like, I know you probably get this a lot, cost per square foot.
Revenue expectations, right?
Yeah, I
Cost
try
per
to help.
square foot.
No. But my first question would be like, what is the square footage for a $300,000 to $500,000 laneway house?
So that range would accommodate like a 600 to a 1,700 square foot area.
Yeah, I'd want that on the higher end if I'm going to spend 500 grand.
No, you're absolutely right. And your revenue uptick, uh, you get a marginal difference when you get that second bedroom and that third bedroom. So it's nice if you can get that extra space.
Right. Well, so what rents are you seeing then? So 600, I think, is considered a one bedroom. That's a typical one. Well, yeah, it's somewhere around one bedroom.
Sure, sure.
What are the ranges in rents that you're seeing?
So I was actually looking at our numbers from the data that we do have. Obviously, there aren't a ton of these on the market, but we do have a small pool of these. And I was looking at some of these properties. The average size is a 2 bedroom. Square footage wise, it's just over 1,000 square feet. And based on that, the average rent that we're seeing is close to $3,500 per unit.
It's not bad.
Yeah, so,
When you
so
get
they range from anywhere from 2,000 a month to we have one that's going for 5,500 a month.
Yeah,
Uh,
the bigger
How
ones,
big?
you're really starting to compete with house rentals. Like it's amazing.
How big is the house for 5,000? Sorry, you said 5,000, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that one is Craig. That was the Jones project. So I think that's a 3 bedroom, right?
That's right. And it's 1,600 square feet, I think.
5,000 in rent. Can you give the intersection in Toronto?
So that one's in Leslieville. It's at Jones, north of Gerrard Street.
Very nice. Yeah, when you see these numbers, it kind of seems worth it. Like that's 1% rule. Like, especially if you already own the land.
Exactly.
Yeah, because a
Yeah,
friend of mine sent me. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
if you already own it, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, no brainer.
If you're looking to purchase to do this, there are a lot more pitfalls, and it becomes more difficult. Um, it's navigable, but ultimately that's how the policy was designed, is to benefit people who already own houses. So if you're looking to purchase for it, you have to be savvy. That's one other thing we've been seeing since this has become hyped in Toronto, is there's a fair amount of misinformation or misleading suggestions that a property is developable for a laneway suite, even if it's not. So it's really a case of buyer beware. And fortunately, there are a lot of free resources available that I would certainly recommend new investors take advantage of. Like our company offers free property reviews that we turn around in just a couple hours. And again, they're free. Send us as many addresses as you want. Like part of our reason for doing these is that we want to protect buyers and make sure they're getting good, qualified information. So using resources like our company and others is really important to make sure you avoid those beginner mistakes.
What's the website?
Lanescape.ca.
I'm hoping that listing agents would ask for the same advice and before they advertise it as something else.
That's the
Yeah,
most
exactly.
naive thing I've ever heard in my whole career.
So
No, it's sad, but it's true. There are some listings that say developable for a laneway suite, and they're categorically not. So you really have to be careful.
well, at least they can probably sue for that. I'd rather have a definitive answer than have to go back and lawsuit somebody.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause, yeah, suing is a whole other headache that nobody wants. Renovations
That's
are
not how we
enough
make our
trouble.
money. We're not lawyers, we're builders.
That's awesome. And because a friend of mine sent me a listing, friend of mine, and I warned him, I know nothing about this area. It's Toronto. So I said, I know nothing about this. And it was advertising. It was already a duplex. I think it was a 3-story, 2.5-story home, already a duplex, not sure the legal status, century home. And it was advertising ability to put something in the rear yard. Right. And,
Well, now you
and I
know,
told
just
him, I know nothing about this market, but I said, perfect world. I can make that duplex a triplex and put it in that laneway suite, but I have no idea.
Well, now you can call Ryan and Craig and just ask us if you're good to go.
Well, now that I know, that's the whole point of this show, is to know stuff. Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And all the listing agents are listening. Like, if you have a legit property, why not find out if it's proper before you advertise it as something else?
Yeah, and I
It
mean, a lot
seems
of
it seems illogical.
a lot of agents are sending potential properties to us to get a sense of if they can actually build a laneway suite on that. So, kudos to those ones.
Well, again, ideally, the selling agent would have already done it.
Yeah.
It's like a condo status certificate. We always get them first because we know everyone's going to ask for it.
Yeah.
Why not just, lay out your cards? Like the more transparent, then the better the transaction. It's never not the case.
Exactly.
Unless you have something to hide. I understand that. This is fascinating stuff. Oh, and then before we were recording, we were talking about what is the difference between a backyard or slash garden suite from a laneway home? Is it different in the handling? Will the city is the city not as open to garden suites versus a laneway suite?
Well, the real answer is that we don't know yet. The city is undergoing a public outreach plan to gain stakeholder buy-in and sort of crowdsource ideas on how the policy should look, which has been pretty exciting to go through. Their goal from the city, we're hearing, is to have a policy in place by the end of this year. And at that point, we'll know what the requirements are. If I were to guess, I would imagine it will be similar to the laneway suite policy in terms of it'll be an as-of-right approval, hopefully deferred from development charges and easy to understand. But we'll find out. Emergency access and construction access is going to be a critical issue because a garden suite, to answer your question, is on a backyard that doesn't have a laneway. So there's no access to that rear yard except through the side yard of the home. Whereas a laneway suite, you have to have a laneway behind you. So it kind of has the ability to be accessed from the rear. So garden suites are likely to be smaller in size, and it'll apply to different areas of the city, more likely the periphery rather than the core. Aside from that, it's a detached secondary unit, and we're hoping the policy is going to be as easy to access and homeowner friendly as the laneway policy has been.
Now your business you have a contracting arm of your business as well?
We work with contractors primarily.
Okay.
We build our own stuff as well.
And you guys are building like from scratch, as in like not modular.
That's correct. We've looked at doing some kind of prefabrication systems before, and there's some that are getting really close to being cost effective. So it's something we want to do. There are a lot of spatial restrictions when it comes to building in a laneway. So the size of panel you can get down a laneway is often fairly restricted to a point where you're not saving a lot of time in exchange for an equal or higher cost. But there's some companies that are really starting to look at that seriously, and it won't be long before we're seeing that as a common construction type.
Yeah, because this could blow up. This could be big. Like, for example, my friend ordered a prefabricated pool. So it's all carbon fiber, I think. And how you deliver it, you use a crane, like, to crane it over your home. And if the house is prefab, why would that be no different with a prefabricated home? Like pour your pad. Hopefully you can just pour a pad. Well, actually, you and I are probably go dig first, dig a basement. So I guess my prefab home doesn't get me everything I want, like as in like accessible, like getting to the backyard and stuff. Because for the listeners' benefit, for anything major like digging a pool, you usually have to take a fence down. And then imagine if without the laneway, same problem. You'd probably have to take a fence down in order to be able to access the backyard to build something.
It's possible to prefabricate an entire laneway suite and drop it in with a crane, but because most of the laneways in Toronto are in these century neighborhoods with big trees and overhead wires and state streets,
and 3-story homes,
it really becomes constricting. So it's definitely a site-by-site analysis, and it depends on your context to know if you can do it.
This is exciting stuff. That's funny. So is it the laneways? The laneways got approved first because it's easier to access versus a garden suite.
Essentially, yeah. The laneway policies are a little that are established in North America. There are other cities that have garden suite policies as close as Ottawa. So that's kind of the next thing that will be happening here. But I mean, you're basically right. Laneways were in downtown neighborhoods where people were already used to secondary suites. So they were a logical first step that will lead to many more.
I'm sure just naturally they would make sense as well because people already had detached garages off a laneway. People are like, that's unused space. I need to stick my mother-in-law somewhere. Let's put in
Most
an
logical
electrical
place
space
is the
heater.
garage.
Yeah. This is pretty cool stuff. And so I know you're here talking about Lanescapes today. But you guys do other stuff too, not just laneway houses, right? You'll do a basement.
Well, our company does not. Lanescape is purely focused on laneway housing. Ryan and I are both passionate about infill housing of all types and investing in homes. So we do basement apartments and whatnot for our own projects, although not always for clients. Maybe Ryan wants to moonlight a little bit, but I won't take those on.
Yeah, so well, I mean, I've recently started I've started wanting to get into real estate investing probably just over a year ago. So I've started kind of educating myself and going to all the meetups and reading the books and things like that. Your podcast included, Erwin, which has been a great help.
Thank you.
And so I recently purchased a property last year, which I basically converted the basement into a second suite. And right now I'm renting that out, and eventually I'll be moving into there, into one of the units.
Where's the
And
property?
continuing to rent out the other. So it's in Etobicoke in Long Branch. So it was one of those older brick bungalows from the 50s, located on a street where a lot of those are kind of getting torn down and rebuilt with 2 stories, or the lots are being split into semis. But we chose to convert the basement instead for now.
Okay, so hang on. A friend of mine just bought a property in Mimico area. Same that you're talking about. Like his back neighbor is, some ginormous 3-story thing that was rebuilt. So it's your, 50 by 150 lot. You bought a bungalow. It's dated. It's really dated. But he paid like 1.15 for it. Ryan? Apologies, but you look pretty young. Is that the kind of stuff that you're buying?
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of a combination of things. To start with, I've kind of always lived frugally. I've always saved up money on the side. My parents are immigrants, so they've kind of always taught me to live within my means, and that's kind of rubbed off on me basically. So I've been saving for a while. I purchased this property with my fiance, so we purchased that together. And basically we saved up for a down payment that way, and we purchased this property. And now with the rents, we're kind of seeing that property cash flowing each month, and that's helping out.
Can you share some numbers? How
Yeah,
long
for
how,
sure.
how long
So
how long were you saving for?
yeah, that's an interesting question. So I mean, I've probably been saving since I was in elementary school, high school. In terms of, so I went to school at Ryerson, studied architecture there, and I did my undergrad and my master's there. And I mean, I was lucky enough to basically have a scholarship that covered my education. And in fact, during my master's, it was actually paying me each month basically to go to school. And on the side, I was also working a few different part-time jobs as well. So I've been saving for quite a while, and then we basically put our money together. We bought this property kind of at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. So we bought it for $855. It was actually listed for higher, and we kind of negotiated down. And I mean, in hindsight, we got a really good price for that, because now already we've seen that prices have appreciated like crazy just over the last year.
What would today's price be?
So, I mean, at least based on the flyers that we're getting from all the realtors in our area, that's at least around 1.1.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. My friend 1.13, I think 1.15 he paid for his. It
Yeah,
completely dated,
exactly.
complete like I don't think the previous owner did anything. At least probably not for 30 years. So it's like, the ornate, really busy looking tile and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, so you probably saved 1.5 at least or more. Gee, you saved a bit of money by taking action at an opportunistic time.
Yeah,
Good for
exactly.
you.
It was funny. We were either going to buy in Hamilton, and then that would have been a strictly investment property, or we were going to buy in Toronto, because I mean, a lot of the architecture firms where I will be working and my fiance's job as well is in Toronto. So we wanted a place that's close to work. And so we thought we might as well buy something that's close to work, rent out half the building and have that pay the mortgage.
So what are the rents? Sorry, what did you have to do to renovate and how much?
Yeah, so we converted the basement. We did a few renovations to the upstairs, but the previous owner had taken pretty good care of it, so we didn't need to do too much on the upstairs. We also saved quite a bit of money because I mean I was able to do the drawings, and we also did a lot of a lot of the work itself in the renovation, which was, I mean, it was a great learning experience. I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing that going forward, but we saved quite a bit. So we were under 50K for the renos when, I mean, if we kind of had someone do all the work, we'd probably be closer to double that. And so now we're renting those out as two separate units. And the basement, we're actually renting to a family friend. So the rents aren't as high as they could be, but we're getting 1,500 for the basement. And for the upstairs, we're getting 2,300.
Are they both friends?
No, no, not the upstairs.
Okay. Yeah, we had a basement rent recently for 1,600 in Hamilton.
Nice. Yeah, we could have definitely gotten more for the basement, but we figured we're just gonna have that person there for maybe a year and year and a half, and it would be nice to have someone who's there to kind of look at the property and kind of take care of it for us.
You can see the attractiveness of Hamilton. We were renting out upstairs for 2,000 now. So we have a delta of $200 a month between properties, and you pay. Well, today, yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like if when I kind of end up purchasing my next property, it's definitely going to be in one of the smaller towns. I know Hamilton also is starting to get super pricey as well.
Yeah. Yeah, but hopefully we'll get the laneway houses and the garden suites soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think we still get houses for about 40% discount from Toronto, though. That's still something. That's fantastic. And then may I ask how much of a down payment you made? Did you put down
Yeah,
5%?
so the other part that I haven't got into is that we had help in terms of financing. So we put down 15%, but we ended up financing it through a holding company. Um, it was actually through my fiance's mom's holding company. So we were able to get favorable rates and like an amortization. So that's really the reason that it works. If we were to go through one of like the big five banks, then obviously the numbers don't really make as much sense as they do right now.
Right. So the your fiance's mom's company got you the mortgage.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Right.
yeah, that's right.
Awesome. And it's a big story these days about how parents have to help kids, and it's actually I don't like some of the headlines how it's framed. It's almost as if you can't afford a house today, blame your parents. Versus so your parents can't afford to help you, you need to help yourself is really what the headline should be,
Mhm.
right? or you need to educate your parents on how they can help you. For example, I was talking to grade eights today, right? They're grade eights. They're not going to do anything. They can't do much themselves, but they should at least, make a couple book recommendations to their parents. You know, hey, did you know sending me to university is going to be like 70 grand? I hope you have plans beyond an RESP. Because I might want to become a doctor. So it's going to be a lot more than that. Something like that. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, that's the thing. Like a huge part of it is just having the right mindset. And I mean, a lot of our parents were immigrants that came here and worked super hard and saved up, and they kind of think, yeah, go into one of the professions and kind of stay safe. But really, when you have that mindset shift, then you can really do some great things.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, that's just fascinating stuff. I have like 3 pages of notes. Anything else you guys want to talk about?
If you're listening from Toronto, make sure you follow us on social media so you can help us advocate for a good garden suite policy. That's something we're trying to stay active in because it was public involvement in the creation of the Laneway policy that led to it being so friendly to homeowners and investors. And if we put our fingerprints on the garden suite policy, this is something else that A, we can capitalize on, but B, will create new rental housing that's really going to affect families in our city in a very positive way. So we're pretty excited about it. And the more people we have helping us with it, the better.
Yeah, do you guys have an Instagram or anything? Because, for example, I'm sure some listeners would like to see some images, like pictures of what you guys are up to.
Yeah, we have lots of portfolio work on our website and social media. If you go to Lanescape.ca, we have links to all of our social media there.
Fantastic. And then how come Toronto was so progressive? Like, I've known Toronto's been progressive forever. Like I mentioned earlier, parking restrictions that we have in Hamilton and St. Catharines and Brantford, all the areas I invest. I used to live in Burlington. Lots of restrictions, tons of restrictions on anything, and a whole moratorium on any sort of new build. Right now, I don't even know what Oakville's not the easiest to deal with either. Why is Toronto so progressive?
When you pay 40% more, you get 40% more. What can I say?
When you pay double land transfer tax and you get more pull.
I mean, sorry, go ahead, Craig.
Oh, we're facing the hit of housing prices more than anyone else.
So the pain is the greatest? Would you say the pain is the greatest for Torontonians?
I mean, yeah, obviously we're all feeling pain with the rising cost of housing, but it's more pronounced in Toronto. So there are a lot of people who are affected by it, and that's led to political action and outspoken citizens.
Yeah. Okay. And the other thing is, I mean, we're seeing 100,000 people coming into the GTA each year. And we need to house all these people. So, I mean, laneway housing and garden suites, although it's not adding a ton of density, it's one of the tools in the toolkit that'll kind of help intensify these areas that aren't really changing much gently without kind of interfering with the neighborhood character that much.
So what can listeners do? Like, what can listeners do to help their city, where they invest, help that city along in becoming more progressive? Because what I see is the NIMBY voice is much louder than everyone else, right? They don't want these things. They don't want things to get more busy. I get it, but like you said, like the pain is so great in Toronto because housing prices are crazy. If you like condos rent for 3,000, not everyone wants to live in a high rise. I live in a house. I can't imagine having to ride an elevator all the time, especially with the kids or folks who have a pet. You have to ride the elevator all the time. Like, what can folks do to move things along in their city?
I mean, what we did was myself and 2 other people established a company and spent 4 years banging our heads against the wall at City Hall until something happened. And honestly, that's kind of what it takes. The good news is that there's provincial policy that requires every municipality to have a policy for homeowners to build detached secondary suites. So it's literally a requirement that every city has to do it. Many of them simply are just not acting on it. So with a little bit of advocacy and using Toronto and Ottawa and Hamilton's secondary suite policies as a template, it should be possible to see some action from your local politicians. But at the end of the day, this was something by the people of Toronto, and you just need to have a confluence of people who care.
Yeah, and I think each person's voice really matters. Like right into the city, like that's something that we encourage people to do when we were trying to get this passed at city. Just writing letters of support, that helps and goes a long way.
The NIMBY voices were loud here when we started, and we made the supporters' voices louder. And when that happens, and politicians see that votes will go their way if they start to support progressive housing policy, things change.
Yeah, because there's no way that the NIMBY voice should be louder than the renter's voice, right? Like, but like NIMBY, I'm gonna stereotype. I'm gonna assume that the NIMBYs are generally quite wealthy, especially in relation to the tenants. Why should the
Established
NIMBYs?
homeowners
Yeah.
care more, they have more to lose. They're in it for the long run. So they have much different motivations. And unfortunately, there is no voice for unbuilt secondary units. So it just takes people with progressive ideas to come up with the right advocacy strategy.
Right. Well, the idea is not that hard to come across. Like, I'm pretty
Just
sure
move to
housing
Toronto.
affordability is probably topic number one. For the next election, I think the next election will be probably after the pandemic's over. So number one will
Yeah.
probably be housing. Like there's all these people like Craig Ryan. You guys probably know a lot of people who want to be doing these things. They just need to be allowed to do them, and they want to do it like on the up and up.
Yeah. Well, and you raise an interesting point. It's not only affordable housing too, it's attainable housing. I mean, it's not, we need affordable housing that benefits all spectrums of income in our province. But also, I mean, to your point, like people who don't have rich parents, how do they get into the market? In my case and in Ryan's case, it's because we spent a lot of years at school learning how to design houses, and we could use that to our benefit. But for the average Torontonian, they need good housing policies that allow them to put their houses to work for them so that they can afford the increasing prices.
So I'm gonna say something that might upset you.
That's not possible, but go ahead.
There's gonna be a lot of people who say I can't afford Toronto. Will Craig come work? Craig and Ryan come work my property in, I don't know, Barrie, Oshawa, Mississauga. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Depends on
If
the
things
project. I mean, we work on multi-unit houses all over Ontario. The majority are in Toronto though, and that's where we specialize. We'll look at anything though. I mean, unfortunately, we don't do laneway houses in Hamilton yet, but there's going to be a rising industry of design professionals who can help out there. It'll start to happen.
it kind of, yeah, like you said earlier, it makes complete sense if you, especially if you already own it. Like it's just, I joke with people. Like we only have like 3 months of the year we can use the backyard. Why not make more utilization of it?
Yeah.
Make it a home, especially if you want your mother-in-law out of the house, type thing. And then I wanted you guys on the show because I view laneway houses and garden suites and as like possibly the final frontier for real estate investing, because I don't know what else we do beyond that. Maybe we do top ups. I don't know. You guys do those as well? Add second or third stories to houses?
Yes, not at Lanescape, but through our other architecture company, we do. Yes. And that's another thing that's growing in Toronto, at least. And forgive our Toronto-centric focus today, but I mean, that's just what we know the most about and where the most action is. But cities looking at expanding housing options in our neighborhoods in a way that will allow for higher density buildings on our main streets and along transit corridors that are secondary to the major avenues. So certainly in Toronto in the next few years, you're going to start to see a lot of new missing middle housing typologies come up that will hopefully see the tides crash on the shores of the adjacent municipalities.
Well, I look forward to it. For the listeners' benefit, can you compare a project where you're doing a top up, so adding a second or third story, compared to a laneway house? Like how does one pick and choose? I'm
Well,
sure there's massive
often,
financial considerations.
I mean, one is not exclusive of the other. A lot of our investor clients will only buy on laneways anymore, so they can do a top up and do a laneway house.
I see.
And really, you know, the thing with top ups and main houses is that they're very contentious for when it comes to their approvals. They're pretty much always going to committee of adjustment, and it's a lot more case by case and a lot more dependent on the existing structure, if you can keep it or if you have to rebuild. So you have to be fairly knowledgeable or have knowledgeable professionals to undertake that with any kind of efficiency. Whereas a laneway suite or basement apartments and other kinds of integral units that don't require changes to the main house, those are a lot more user-friendly and policy-friendly. So those are the big differences. It costs more money and it takes a lot more time to change the main house.
I don't think any investor wants to hear that. Path to least resistance, please.
Exactly.
And then I lost my next question, but that's okay. Oh, sorry. You mentioned that you guys done about 50 laneway houses. When was the bulk of them done? Has it been like a hockey stick, or it's been like 10 each year type thing?
Well, those are all in varying stages of completion. I think we have, what is it, about 10 or 15 that are under construction or completed. And then the balance are in varying stages of design and approvals. So it's been a steady growth. We started off getting, you know, 1 or 2 projects a month, and now we're at a point where we get 3 to 5 new projects every month. So we've seen steady growth, and that's been pretty consistent with just the overall development pattern of the whole city. Like the first year the laneway policy was in place, I think fewer than 100 applications were submitted, and we're going to start outpacing that by a substantial margin year over year.
Yeah. One of the funny things that we're noticing now is that the neighbors actually wait until there's a laneway suite on their street, and then you kind of just see them all popping up. So now there are a few streets where we have multiple projects, some of them side by side, which is good to see. But I think a lot of people kind of just wait to see that proof of concept.
What are people saying about these? Like, so what are the neighbors saying about them? What are the tenants saying about laneway housing?
Generally, we get positive feedback because they're relatively restricted by the policy. They can't be very large. I mean, there's always going to be someone who's upset about new construction occurring in the neighborhood, but almost always, especially when they're completed, the neighbors are excited by it, and we at least get a lot of compliments. The fun thing is that they can't say anything about it until you're under construction. So it's not like a main house where they can object to it prior to your approvals being issued, which is frankly the way it should be if you're following the as of right bylaws. So it's been a much different reception because it just kind of starts happening and then it's over and you can only reflect on it. So you can't prejudge it. And I would say it's been more well received than houses that have to go to committee, for example.
And then you talked about it always happens. Neighbors don't like the construction noise to start with. When you're building one of these, do you obstruct the laneway?
No, we're not permitted to. So staging is a big concern with these. Our contractors have to be very clever about how they stage materials on site, how they strategize deliveries and the like. So a lot of coordination is required. But yeah, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, you got to keep the laneway open and build around it.
Fascinating. How many of these actually keep the garage?
Depends on the main house, I would say. So if you have a particularly large or luxurious main house, you're going to want to keep a garage for that unit.
That's not an investor though, right?
Yeah, that would be more like a self-build. Whereas if you have multiple units in the main house and you're just purely looking to maximize revenue, often what we'll do is we'll pull the laneway house away from the laneway by a couple feet so we can fit a parallel parking space between the laneway house and the laneway, but not have an integral parking space. That just invariably leads to a higher net operating income. So again, use case dictates whether you keep it or not.
Interesting. And then these laneway houses, is it essentially a self-contained home? Like has its own air conditioning, hot water tank, furnace?
Everything can be separately metered, so your tenant are paying their own utilities. It's literally a second home, a modest home, but a second home.
Well, 1,700 square feet's not modest. $1 million.
1,700 is an outlier. The majority of our projects are around 1,000 square feet. You need to have a pretty good lot to get up to the maximum zoning size of 1,700.
Sorry, I don't mean to keep harping on the cost thing. What would 1,000 square foot cost if that's the typical?
So that's, I mean, we're seeing those prices in the 400s kind of thing. It's your all-in budget.
Oh, cheaper than a Toronto condo.
Big time, big time. Once you already own the land.
Once you already own the land. That's cool stuff. And then what kind of tenant profiles are you seeing? Are these like, blue collar folks that work at the automotive industry? These guys?
Yeah, the thriving downtown Toronto automotive industry.
Yeah, that one.
Honestly, it's a wide variety of tenants. They're very attractive to families who are waiting to get into the housing market. So, perhaps couples with a young kid or a dog. We'll often see roommates if you're in a neighborhood near a college or just a kind of a vibrant downtown area. So it really depends. And it's also dependent on the house itself. I mean, the big ones that act and feel like detached homes, those are very attractive to executives and families with high budgets. The tighter ones that might be in more vibrant neighborhoods would be more appealing to young couples or roommates.
And then how much green space do they get? Like how much yard space do they get? And is it shared with the main house? How do they usually work it?
Yeah, so depending on the type of laneway suite you're building, you have to set back from the main house a certain distance. So if you're building a one-story house, then I believe it's five meters that you have to set back.
That's
versus
not much.
if you're building, yeah, exactly. Versus if you're building a two-story house, then which the majority of the projects are, then you have to set back 7.5 meters from the main house.
That's not much.
And then on top of that, there are requirements for soft landscaping, which are actually quite stringent. So and that depends on the width of the property. So if the width is greater than 6 meters, then you need to have 85% soft landscaping in the backyard. And if it's less, then you can have slightly less soft landscaping. And then there's also a requirement for soft landscaping on the front. So on the part that is adjacent to the actual lane. So you need to have 75% soft landscaping there. Unless you have a driveway, then that part is kind of exempted.
In terms of the functionality, it's really up to you. We'll often see like the space between the laneway house and the main house either dedicated solely to the main house or to the laneway house. Sometimes you'll put a fence down the middle and split it half and half. That's another thing, that there's no requirement to do anything there. It's sort of what works best with the units on the property.
Very cool. All right, gentlemen, we're running out of time. Can you guys tell me more about the business and like who is your typical client? At what point folks should reach out to you? Tell me more.
Sure. So, I mean, we have clients that range from homeowners to investors. And it's a pretty even split, although we maybe have slightly more homeowners, like more than 50%. Our designs will cover a wide range of use cases. Historically, it was either laneway suite designed for maximum revenue or one designed to accommodate a loved one. Although recently we're seeing a rise in home offices and sort of additional space that complements the main house. So there are a lot of different use cases. Our clients, ideally reach out to us as early as possible. Like a lot of people will reach out to us before they've even purchased a property to verify that it is developable. And like any design firm or project management firm, we're happy to provide quotes and compete with other architects or whoever might be looking to work with you on your project. And then work all the way through to design and approvals being completed, possibly managing construction as well. We really try to offer a full range of services and provide whatever our client needs.
And so you'll even manage the construction? Like you'll refer a general contractor and someone can really just hand you a check and sign some paper and really?
Yeah, I love it when people just hand me a check and then I say, don't worry, you'll get a Laneway suite soon. I would say the majority of our clients hire their own general contractor and we just act as, the design consultant. However, yeah, we offer a full range of services and we try to accommodate whatever our clients need. So we can vary that to do as much or as little during construction as they want.
Got it. My clientele is typically from out of town. My typical client is from West GTA, buying in Hamilton, St. Catharines, Brantford. So they don't have the capacity necessarily to be even on site once a week, right? When traffic gets back to traffic, it's prettiest, Remember traffic?
And in that case, yeah, we can either act as the construction manager or just the contract administrator who's acting as a second set of eyes. So all of that's possible.
Awesome. That's actually a common mistake. Like I think everyone should still make a visit to be on site once a week. But even if they do, often enough they don't know what they're looking at. Oh yeah, there's a hole in the ground. Great. There's a concrete pad. There's concrete formed walls. Again, they don't know what they're looking at though. They don't know if it's done right or not. Yeah. This is it there or not? Doesn't mean it's done right. Awesome. So I like to give some time to my guests to always share any final thoughts you want to share with folks without any prompting for myself. Please go ahead.
Well, all I'll say is it's been an absolute pleasure, Erwin. Thanks so much for having us. For any of your listeners who are looking at properties and want to verify that it's developable for a Laneway suite, just email the address to info@Lanescape.ca. We turn around free property reviews, usually in a matter of hours. And also, anyone who's interested in advocating for new housing policies, follow us on our social media, visit our website, Lanescape.ca, and follow along. We need all the help we can get to make sure new policies like this are benefiting Torontonians.
Awesome. Ryan?
Yeah, no, I mean, to tackle what Craig said, I mean, I think it's really important to get educated. As we said before, there is a lot of misinformation out there. So work with someone who knows what they're doing. I mean, whether it's us or someone else, and it doesn't matter. Just make sure you get educated so that you have a good understanding of if you can actually build one of these Laneway suites. Because I mean, it's obviously a lot pricier later on when you run into issues. So it's just always important to work with a good team, as you know. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to be on here, Erwin. Your podcast has provided tons of value to me over the last year or so. So super excited to have received the opportunity to be on.
Well, thank you for being here to give back. If you guys have any sort of sample communications that folks could send to their city councilors, for example, if you want to pass them along here, I can post them on my website. If you guys can post them on your own website, that'd be awesome. Because we need to make things as simple as possible for everyone.
I mean, I think that's what we did early on, right, Craig? We kind of had a sample email template that people could just send to their counselors.
Yeah. Because the mistake I think people make is
for garden suites soon.
The mistake I think people make is that they think that people actually read this stuff on the receiving end. It's really just for or against. Someone's just checking for or against, and then they tally it up. Wow, we have more fours. Oh no, we have more NIMBYs. So no, scrap this. Folks, you don't have to overthink it. It's just just put it in the line early. Be nice, play polite. Are you for or against something? That's all they care about. They're looking for a data point.
Yeah.
Sad to see.
I will just mention one other thing before we go. I just
Yeah, yeah.
remembered we do have monthly webinars. So for people that are interested in laneway suites, obviously it's catered to the Toronto market, but it gives you a great primer on what these things are and what the requirements are and what you should be looking out for. So, I mean, you can find that, I think, probably on our Instagram. Just keep an eye out or Google it. You'll find it.
Amazing. Well, as soon as garden suites become bigger, I'm sure everyone's be bugging you guys. Like you guys are early stages of something that could explode.
Yeah, I think
We're
there's
past
like
that. Laneway houses have already exploded, and like it's amazing. It's been so great to see.
yeah, and there's like 30 to 40,000 properties, I think, in the city alone that could potentially qualify. So, I mean, it's a huge opportunity.
Right. And then what do you think the upside is for if garden suites become allowed? How many more properties will be potential?
Significantly more than that.
Yeah. Like 100 times more? Like 50 times more? Like
Probably
that's a
not that
lot
many.
more.
I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of backyards in Toronto that are ripe for secondary suites. So it's going to depend on the policy, and we'll see. We'll see, but it could be big.
Yeah, and I look forward to it because I want one for each of my properties. Gentlemen, thanks so much for doing this. Thanks for taking the time and sharing. And Ryan, thanks for reaching out and being on to give back.
Thank you. It's
All
been
right,
a
thanks,
pleasure.
gentlemen.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
See you,
guys.
Irvin.
Bye.